Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here with Sean Tilley, the Director of Open Sorcery at Diaspora, and my name is Bill Ottman. I'm an editor at Explosion of Truth and co-creator of Minds.com. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, so just to give everyone a little background, Diaspora is a user-owned distributed social network that's based on free software, and it's cool. The word actually originates from a Greek word that refers to a scattered or dispersed population. So it's this idea of a decentralized network, which means that there is no central control mechanism, and it can so the ideas can never really be censored because it's scattered throughout servers all over the world. So welcome, Sean. What's new in the Diaspora world?
Well, a couple months back, we officially launched Diaspora as a community-run project rather than a commercial kind of startup company. So we've opened up more to the opinions of the community, and we've kind of converged together on what we want to do with the project, where we want to take it, and just kind of a reworking of our core philosophy of how we think things should work and how we think the web should be.
Absolutely. So do you guys have a central place where you work? I'm guessing probably not, going along with the rest of the philosophy of the company.
Right. I mean, Diaspora in many senses is a global community of contributors and developers. And really, when I say contributor, I don't just mean programmer. We have people that help with translations. We have people that are just out there in the community, just using the software every day and contributing to the content on the network. It's really kind of a moving target in which anyone can contribute to this movement of decentralized social.
So when you log in to a node of Diaspora, is there common data between the nodes?
Sort of. It's best way to think of it is that, let's say your node, or as we call them, pod, is where you choose to store your personal data. You move, you have all your photos, all your status updates, all your comments. Now, things that are public, like public status updates and public comments, are shared between the different servers, as are private messages, but the private messages themselves are designed in such a way that only the recipients could read it.
Right. Okay. So there's a good kind of metadata system for knowing what is shared between pods and not.
Exactly. I mean, the big focus is privacy. We want to empower people to be able to show themselves in such a way that they allow other people to see only what they want to be seen. In a sense, maintaining your social identity online, which I think in this day and age is more important than ever.
Right. So did I hear that, so it was a Kickstarter funded originally, right?
Correct.
And did I hear that Zuckerberg invested in it?
Yeah, apparently at some point Mark Zuckerberg said, hey, I think this is actually a cool project. I'd like to invest a little bit in it and throw some money towards the Kickstarter. That's
interesting. I mean, you just wouldn't think that with everything going on with the new policy on Facebook and Instagram that he would put energy there.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly kind of surprising, but I think at the same time, it's kind of forward-thinking of any entrepreneur to look at a new technology and say, hey, this might shape the landscape of how we communicate 15 years down the road.
Right.
Perhaps I could, kind of see a bit of myself in these people and see how they apply their vision of what the web should be.
Right. It's a little bit confusing because I just feel that Facebook is so non-transparent, and it seems that if it wanted to, it could appease so many of the desires of the open source and kind of distributed network community by, there's so many initiatives that they could take, but it just seems they're almost
Well, the reality is, in many ways, they're a company that's motivated by profits, and because of that, their hands are tied as far as choices in ethical computing that they can make. The entire business strategy is based around the idea of selling advertisements to people in in highly personal and invasive ways.
Right. So there's the ethical software side, but there's also just the idea of crowdsourcing in a productive way for, other initiatives, conscious initiatives like global policy. I mean, I noticed, did you vote in that last Facebook vote about it? I think it was a vote for the right to vote, but it was also a vote for these new policy changes regarding what was it? Was it ownership of content?
Yeah, it was something like that. Honestly, I didn't vote on that because honestly, I feel like in many ways Facebook as a network is kind of a sinking ship as far as personal privacy is concerned.
Right. It just seems that they're getting so much negative press about it, and people are really upset. Granted, rarely will will many make the move to go to an alternative, but I feel like they could quell that problem pretty easily just by, even having some open dialogue about it and showing that they care about the user in
Sure.
any way. I mean, if they want, I've always thought that on the front page of Facebook, they could be generating amazing metrics and statistics about what the whole site thinks about any range of issues, from politics to the way the site works to, solving various global issues. I don't get why they don't source that energy. It would be so easy.
Yeah, but it's not their focus, and
Yes.
That's just an unfortunate reality that we live in.
Yeah, I'm just surprised by the whole thing. Anyway, so is Diaspora engaged with any other distributed networks closely?
Yeah, actually, we've been opening up a lot of dialogue with the Tent guys. They're the guys that are writing this protocol specifically for different servers to be able to talk to one another, and that's what we call Federation for Decentralized Social. But the idea is that by unifying on a standard that's built out of tools that aren't a patchwork of crazy things like O-status can be, we might be able to move forward in having different networks be able to talk to one another seamlessly.
Right. That's great. So it's tent.io, right?
That's correct.
Great. So what protocol was that?
The Tent protocol, and it's nothing official. Right now, the Tent devs are talking about taking Diaspora's interface and actually making a prototype with it to make it a Tent app, in which it has all the benefits of the protocol and the third-party developer API. You could just say that their API strategy is similar to that of AppNet's.
So can you explain to people who might be so familiar with protocols and
Sure.
this kind of thing, like what exactly, how that affects them, what it means to them?
Sure. Well, for Federation to work, or rather for different servers to be able to talk to one another, and for you to be able to talk to your friends, you're going to need a protocol that sends your data over the wire. And that's okay, because if it's engineered the right way, it should be secure and stable and not need a middleman like Facebook to be routed through. You can maintain communications with whoever you want, and that's kind of also part of the appeal of opening up the protocol. The protocol is the language that these servers speak to one another, and to make that universal, and any application on the web can make use of to communicate with other people, I think is a wonderful thing, and it really kind of takes away any barriers to communication or censorship that you might have.
So, like XMPP is a protocol. What are some other examples that people might be familiar with?
Well, the big social protocols right now, there's O-status, there's Zot, there's Tent, there's even parts of O-status are other protocols. There's activity streams, there's all sorts of different things, little different puzzle pieces that we've been using together to try and build the social web up to this point. And I think a lot of these projects right now are looking at how do we take this further and how do we connect to one another.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, and that's what we're talking about on Mind.com. We're running through a kind of a fusion of a bunch of different open source platforms, including Elg and Kaltura. And so, have you had much dialogue with Elg?
Not much. It's the reason being that it's a very different project that I'm largely kind of unfamiliar with. Right now we've kind of stuck to, you talked to a project that's more native towards you. Like Tent they're largely Ruby and JavaScript guys. Libertree, they're also a Ruby project. We certainly do maintain a dialogue with as many different projects as we can. It's just no one's really approached us about anything.
So it's funny because for the common user of different social networks, it seems like they really just don't care. They just want it to be as easy as possible. And I think if they knew that they were being protected more and that they weren't giving all of their content to, some all-powerful corporation, I think that they would like that. But I mean, are you guys kind of working on a goal of making it just as user-friendly as a lot of the standard social networks out there?
Absolutely, and I think UX has been a focus for Diaspora since day one. The interface has gotten gradually simpler over time, and in many ways is comparable to something like Facebook or Tumblr or Twitter in the fact that it's relatively easy for people to use and get started on. But, at the same time, we have to think about how the way we use the web is constantly changing. In all likelihood, you could see people moving off of something like Diaspora and eschewing normal social networks altogether to either host their own and just connect to the specific people they care about.
Right. It's just that setting up a server isn't super easy for someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
Sure, not yet, but I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
A good example is like the Tent guys have a couple of different companies they're looking at starting hosting services like Camper and there's a couple more. But the idea is that if you can make the hosting half of it easy, then really it's kind of a no-brainer to want to switch to your own social node anywhere on the web. And I think it's a very powerful idea that you don't have to tie yourself to a social network at all. Yeah,
that is definitely a great goal. So have you heard much about, in terms of like the funding of all these projects, I think it's super important, and so the crowdfunding basis of Diaspora I think is super compelling. But then, we've done a bunch of research at exposing the truth about the origins of Facebook and who's actually behind it. Because there's the other idea that, a central location is not always a super negative thing. It has a lot to do with who is controlling that central entity. Now, if the crowd...
It also has, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it also has to do with how much it's going to scale. And it's largely a problem of principle when you look at the reality that Facebook has more than 500 million people on it now. That's 500 million people's personal lives, information, and data just constantly being stored by a third party that...
Oh, exactly. And it's intelligence-backed venture firms that are involved with it. So, there's definitely an element of surveillance to it.
Yeah, I agree.
So how does the decentralized model avoid government surveillance? Aren't providers still in your system? Even if you're hosting your own node, there's still going to be that.
It's a very realistic problem, and I don't honestly think that hosting it on a server is the end-all, be-all solution. But I think it's a stepping stone to where we need to really get. And, I could see maybe 5 years from now people building decentralized social on top of something like I2P, which is a darknet protocol that sends P2P packets of data over the wire to about everybody. Good luck even trying to track something like that.
Right. So a quick last thought. I think we should do a break, but so are you a user of Tor?
Yeah, every now and then I use it, but normally I don't feel too compelled. I don't think anyone's watching me, and if they are, I definitely would like to give them a shot.
Right, because there ends up being this decision that you have to make of, okay, yes, privacy is important. You don't want people abusing your rights, and you do have the freedom you should at least have the freedom to be anonymous and to protect your information. But ultimately, with the open source type consciousness, a lot of people will say, I don't care if I'm being tracked because I have nothing to hide. So, which is kind of a weird attitude, but it also makes a lot of sense because I think that, in some senses, some people want their information and what they do to be public. And, when you're in this very private, paranoid perspective, that can be a little bit damaging too. So there's a balance. I think sides are important.
Well, and I would say that I think there's a weird stigma going on towards just having any sort of privacy. If you're a person that likes to keep to yourself, you're likely to be judged by others as being a little bit strange. I mean, that's just part of society. That's the world we live in. And I think it's almost a sickness that we treat that attitude that wanting to be private is automatically equal to having something to hide. I think that's disingenuous, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Aaron, let's go to the break.
You're listening to A2Zen FM, life-altering talk radio. Anything from activism to Zen and everything in between, right here and now. Informative, inspiring, engaging. Our hosts provide you with the global news and educated advice you need to make a difference in your life, in your world. Knowledge is power. A2Zen.fm.
Exposing the Truth Radio intends to be as open and uncensored as possible. Freedom to express unpopular views is key to global evolution. Everything we post and allow posted is not necessarily reflective of the absolute truth, nor do we endorse every word or every piece of media here. Having stated this, we seek to post and broadcast highly accurate information from alternative, mainstream, and fringe sources. Remember to listen to Exposing the Truth Radio, and you decide.
This broadcast is not the views or opinions of A2Zen.fm nor any of the hosts here at A2Zen.fm radio and magazine. To contact Aaron, go to Facebook, Exposing the Truth, or exposingthetruth.info. Now let's get back to our hosts on Exposing the Truth here on A2Zen.fm.
All right, we're here with Sean Tilley, the director of Open Sorcery at Diaspora. And it's funny, we have these kind of repeated disclaimers in the commercials here, but I think it's important to emphasize because a lot of times people will just over-associate things that are said, and it's so important to be able to talk about any topic and not have, like you were talking about, Sean, the stigma attached. I mean, so this kind of dialectic between being totally open to talk about everything and being more tentative and particular about what you talk about, and it kind of goes through the spectrum to this dualism between open source and closed information. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that contrast, because when you think of closed information, usually closed information, the way it functions is to hide information from all people, and it's usually done on the level of government hiding things from their own people, which is questionable in which, whose interest is like there. But when you look at open source, it's more about empowering the end user and the developer, person running the server, and whoever else is involved. It's about sort of more of a collective consciousness of sharing information that is beneficial rather than hiding truth from people that might be painful.
Right. So, yeah, and then it's funny, there's also, actually, people will often confuse the ideas of open source with free software, which I think it's a little bit nitpicky, but
no, and I agree. There are significant differences in ideology.
Yeah.
Even the culture surrounding both movements definitely are different.
Yeah, and the distinction, it comes down to almost a problem with language, because the word free in English, it has different meanings. Facebook tries to say that they're free, but okay, they're free as in free. They're like Richard Stallman likes to say, but they're not. They're obviously not free. They're taking your information. They're not sharing their code with you. They're not letting you know what their software is doing to you. So they would kind of abuse the definition. For the free software movement tries to say that they're really embracing what free means, and then they would criticize the open source movement because they're not being very political in their in their activity, and they want people to be able to make proprietary the code that they take and stuff like that.
Right, and I agree that I think it's a matter of philosophy as to what a person is allowed to do with code. If you look at something like the GNU GPL, you have all the freedom in the world with the software that you use that's licensed under it, but you can't, for example, license that software under a proprietary license. Your only freedom is to not lessen its freedom. Your only restriction, I mean. And then you look at something like BSD, which the BSD license focuses more on, you could relicense this software as proprietary if you really wanted to. It makes no difference to us. And they're just very different models of getting involved in communities and working together. Free software tends to be a little more activist, and open source tends to be a little bit more pragmatic.
How's Diaspora licensed?
Diaspora is actually a GPL, which is a GNU FSF license.
Right. So that, for people who, it's a little bit technical, but basically it's this idea of share alike or copy left, which furthers the sharing process, so that everybody who takes it, they can change it, they can do whatever they want with it, but at the end of the day, they have to give that freedom to everybody else. They cannot restrict it later on. So that's great. That's great that Diaspora is doing that. I mean, do you think that it is, a hindrance on the, opening up of information? Is open source a hindrance on this process?
No, not at all. I mean, part of the point is being developed out in the open, and I think a technology like this absolutely has to be drafted in the open for people to really call it secure. But, yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Well, because, the GNU and Free Software Foundation people they don't even want to associate with the open source world because they think that it is kind of obstructing the movement. And I think that that's a little bit extreme. You have to have the full spectrum. So you have to have...
I would say the best way to look at it is both sides like to bash heads with each other. Really, they're reaching towards very similar goals in some ways, but really one of the difficulties we've had that's kind of been interesting is that even though we're an AGPL project, the language that we use, Rails, and the developer community that revolves around it is largely an MIT license community, and they're more open source than they are free software. So it's interesting to see the convergence there.
Right, because you're applying the free software philosophy to a code that you're using is a little bit more open for people to restrict it if they want.
Right.
Right.
But you can't take like the Diaspora code base and make a proprietary version of it. That goes against the AGPL.
Right. Yeah, and so this might be new information for a lot of people listening, but it's really important to understand how whether it's your content for your code or whatever creation it is, you want to know what legal framework your piece of media or code is being put out into the world in, because otherwise, it's going to potentially drastically restrict the amount that information can get out there. So, like, if you upload something to YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or a lot of the other main and most popular networks out there, you're actually unknowingly restricting your content from also people who could be embracing it. That's why.
If we look at some of these different networks that are very popular right now, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, they all deal with the same problem in that they're prone to censorship.
Absolutely. What are some ways that could tell people about how censorship's occurring there?
You could just have any articles about some of the videos that have been removed from the Occupy protests even. There are all kinds of instances in which a foreign country will want a video of a protest removed or at least blocked in their own country. And Google, having an international presence, will feel obligated to comply. And I'm not slanting Google or Twitter or Facebook or any of those companies, but they all make use of the same procedure because their global presence requires that they make that kind of compliance.
Right. So the decentralized model can get around that because there isn't a big corporation that is. But Diaspora is still subject to the law.
Sure, and if people were to use Diaspora to host illegal content, it would still be within the responsibility of the people, the ISP hosting the server to, maybe turn it over to the police if the content's like child pornography or something like that.
Right. So, but Diaspora doesn't have, because the other people are hosting servers, have you guys found, does that make it so that you're not responsible for getting it down? Like, do you have to contact that pod?
You can, and I think really anyone should have an obligation to report such a thing. But,
right.
The whole nature of decentralized social is complicated, especially from a legal standpoint, because there are so many nodes all communicating as one.
Yeah, I'm actually banned on Facebook right now because there's actually a loophole that has been exposed where basically anybody can make anybody else an admin on a page. And so when you make someone else an admin, you could potentially then post something on that page where they're an admin that is illegal content, and then not only that person, but all different admins connected with that page will also be banned. So, we at Exposing the Truth, a bunch of us have issues with this for the past 6 months to a year. I've actually been banned for like 2 to 3 months of the past 6 months for stuff that I didn't even post. And it's definitely obstructing my ability to communicate with all sorts of people. So, you log in and then they'll show you the violation content, and you say I didn't post that and I have no idea who did. Yet I'm done. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time.
I even saw editors of, I think, The New Yorker, of their social media department. A bunch of them got banned for like a cartoon of, there might have been a boob in it, like a New Yorker cartoon, and it's way over the top. I'm really curious on this convergence of content, questionable content, and one of the things we're really trying to do at minds.com is be as open to this, all these different types of content as possible, and to be as uncensored as possible. So I think it would be great to have a network or network of networks that isn't going to censor people for certain content, but there are these very strange standards that exist about what's appropriate and what isn't.
Well, and as these laws become more and more difficult to grapple with for social media sites, as far as user freedom is concerned, it's going to become more of a problem, and we're going to need to move away from this unsustainable model of these gigantic data silos that hold all of your data and censor the things you can and cannot say. You look at something like Facebook now, and there's instances where you can't even share specific link in their website just because they're questionable to the authorities that run the site.
Right. So what would you say are the most uncensored networks globally?
Globally? That's a difficult one. I mean, I think really anything that you can put together with free software that's decentralized is ideally what you should be moving to. But realistically speaking, I think the only really safe place on the web right now is probably personal servers, dark nets, and things like Diaspora or Friendica or any of the other decentralized social projects out there. They're trying to move away from this unsustainable model.
We should change the name of Darknet to Lightnet. I say, because it really is. It is more the light. And I think a lot of people get scared because they don't understand what it means to be a hacker, and they think that, they associate hacker with pirate, with thief, with, darkness, with paranoia. But so I think a big prod for us is to rebrand the whole. I mean, I think the hacker movement is doing well, or at least better recently, where people are starting to associate things like Anonymous with freedom fighters, and Anonymous will take down child pornography sites and different companies that are obstructing human rights. But I mean, this whole darkness thing needs to change.
Sure, and it's just the idea that we could be communicating in a much more efficient and secure way than we are now. And I think that's really the direction that social is going to be taking over the next 5 years.
But people don't want to compromise between, giving away their information and making money. So I think another important progression that the free software and open source worlds need to make is helping people still make money, because a lot of the resistance to it comes out of fear that, if I give away my content, if I give away my code, then I'm going to be left in the dust. Everybody else is going to take my information and profit off of it. I mean, one of the arguments that the Free Software Foundation will say is, hey, if you give it away, you can still make money. You can still sell it.
The software as a service model has become relatively popular within the free software community because of that. You have websites that'll release open source software, but they'll have a special version of it that they just run themselves. That maybe they'll charge someone $5 a month to make use of, but it'll have a couple extra doodads on or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not uncommon with free software projects right now to do something like that, because you're right. When the focus isn't on making money for the software, it has to be focused on other things. And it's a very different development model than commercially funded software.
Mm-hmm. I saw a really cool article out of TechDirt where they give away free ebooks, and they're a great site just for talking about all these kinds of copyright issues. And they created a graph that showed how, even though they give away all of their ebooks, something like 50%, maybe even over 50% of the people who downloaded it gave them money because they provided tools for you to make voluntary donations anything from like $1 all the way up. So, and it's that same idea how a lot of people, you can get any musical album you want in the world. You can torrent it or get it from wherever, but if you support the band, a lot of times people will, even though they know they could do that, they'll buy the album anyway.
Yeah. Well, and truthfully, if you look at that kind of model, bands don't really make money from just album sales alone. Really, that's what the record company is making. Bands themselves make money from selling merchandise and performance tickets.
Right, live is definitely where most of it's coming from. All right, hey, let's go to a break, and we'll be back in a few.
Sure.
You're listening to A2Zen FM, life-altering talk radio. Anything from activism to Zen and everything in between, right here and now. Informative, inspiring, engaging. Our hosts provide you with the global news and educated advice you need to make a difference in your life, in your world. Knowledge is power. A2Zen.fm.
Exposing the Truth Radio intends to be as open and uncensored as possible. Freedom to express unpopular views is key to global evolution. Everything we post and allow posted is not necessarily reflective of the absolute truth, nor do we endorse every word or every piece of media here. Having stated this, we seek to post and broadcast highly accurate information from alternative, mainstream, and fringe sources. Remember to listen to Exposing the Truth Radio, and you decide.
This broadcast is not the views or opinions of A2Zen.fm nor any of the hosts here at A2Zen.fm radio and magazine. To contact Aaron, go to Facebook, Exposing the Truth, or exposingthetruth.info. Now let's get back to our hosts on Exposing the Truth here on A2Zen.fm.
All right, welcome back. So, Sean, how can people get involved with Diaspora? What's the quickest way?
Well, the quickest way is to just use the software. We have a page over at podupti.me. It spells poduptime, and that's a list of like all the different Diaspora pod servers that are out there that are openly welcome for people to join, and you can connect to people on these different servers and make friends and just kind of participate in this Glow community. And from there, we've tried to make it relatively easy for new coming developers to get involved and explain what needs work. And we do all of our governance out in the open, trying to come to consensus on where the project needs to go. So we focused on making everything very low barrier so that anyone that wants to get involved can jump right in and help us try and change the state of the social web now.
Is there one pod that, I know this is kind of against the point, but is there one that's the biggest?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably joindiaspora.com is one of the biggest pods out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And part of that is just simply because it was one of the first pods up. It's been up since, about October of 2 years ago, so it's
Great.
always just kind of been the main one. It's been closed off for a long time, but we've opened it up and had a certain people actually sign up for it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so because you mentioned governance, I want to talk about that a little. There's one thing I've really been interested in is, you were talking about government information and, how that's obviously not super transparent. I'm wondering ways that we could urge the government to adopt models, more along these lines, which would open up information to people and also, help sort of a common governance structure, more of a crowdsourced governance structure. I made a comment the other day on a post about how I think that the government that open sources or frees its information to the public first and, gets rid of all the classified stuff, I think that they'll probably go down in history as one of the most evolved and impactful systems ever to come onto the earth. And I just think that it would drastically change the paradigm of how everything operates globally, with in terms of what people know about the state of technology, and also the way that decisions are made.
Well, and I think the best way to approach something like that would be just work from the bottom up. The status quo right now is largely populated by people that are motivated by greed, money, or corporate ties. And it's made transparent, ethical lawmaking and governance in our country, and for better than the rest of our world, as being very problematic. You have people even in the UN that a majority of their policies and decisions are made in backroom deals, and so some delegates aren't even allowed to see what's being discussed.
Right. There's no real sense of effort at all, it seems, to really tackle the issue. I mean, we have the tools, even if it was with a common mainstream network like Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or something. It's just like, rarely do many people get out to vote for their politicians or for different, policy changes in their local area. But, most everybody is logging on to the internet every day. And so the outlet is there for everybody to participate in some sort of an open democracy, but it's just not being used. It's not, sorry?
I think what needs to happen is that you have to start on a very low level of our government structure in order to truly change it from the inside out. It's not a point of revolution that's going to change the way that we're living now. It's, as you said, it's a state of evolution, and we have to constantly be pushing towards it. And I think the best way to do that is to look at the small towns, the more rural areas, and understand, what are the needs of these relatively few groups of people, and how can we get this small group of people to work together in a better open governance structure as a model for larger systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on digital voting and how we can keep it secure? I mean, it seems voting fraud is cross-spectrum, whether it's with paper ballots or it's with, computer tampering. I mean, just realistically getting the whole planet to participate in voting, it has to be digital. And it seems that there should be ways to secure it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, digital voting and electronic voting, for that matter, make me deeply uncomfortable, because a lot of the voting machines in this country are sponsored in part. Their businesses in part are sponsored by people in Congress and people in government right now, and so there's no openness about how these machines work. So you can always kind of assume that perhaps these machines have a bias towards whoever sponsored the construction of such devices.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that I'm not really talking about digital voting in terms of the electronic machines that you would go to, but I mean,
sure.
in the
but
way,
it's the same problem.
I guess, but like for the pages on Facebook with the most likes, or the Twitter pages with the most likes, I guess, yes, there are ways that people have found to put bots in there to generate numbers, but it seems that it's even, I think it would be useful as a secondary tools for people to have a general idea of what the population is thinking about certain issues. It just seems like it's pretty accurate. I mean, on Exposing the Truth, we have coming on 450,000 likes, and I'm pretty confident that those are real people.
Sure.
So that, I mean, if we did voting more like that, I mean, those are numbers. Those are, like, when you like something, that is a vote for it in a sense.
Well, I mean, in reality, you're voting every day. You're voting with the things that you like, the things that you read, the things that you favorite, and the things that you do. It's the actions of yourself that aggregate together to make your opinions and the votes that you put forward. And, I feel that in many ways, we need to find not necessarily a system for voting based on majority rule, but rather trying to find consensus with one another and figuring out by discussing the issues and what issues we have with the problem that's going on, we individually can all come together and better understand each other's needs.
Yeah, it seems like it's steps along the way, though. I mean, consensus-based organizations, I've had a lot of success with them, and it is always great to know that everyone is supporting a certain initiative, but in more realistic terms, I mean, isn't more like direct democracy and
I'm not
voting,
saying it's
majority
a
voting,
system.
like it's a step along the way.
Right. It's not a system that would scale out to millions and millions of people. Direct democracy wouldn't work in this day and age, but nevertheless, we can still band together and represent ourselves and come to a better understanding of problems as they come up.
Right, but so technically, what would your take be on this scenario? So
Sure.
say you go to Google, Facebook, whatever homepage. There's a listing of, say, let's talk global elections. There's a listing of all the countries and of all the candidates, and it's through the same like system or 1+ system that whatever these networks use. And if they did that, then everybody without a doubt, millions and millions of people would be participating, and we would be able to have somewhat of a clearer picture than the mainstream media is spewing to us. I mean, probably people like Ron Paul would have gotten tremendous support in some sort of a system like that. Not that I'm taking a left or right perspective, but
right.
like even someone on the left could rise up, and it seems that they could do really well, and maybe that's why they don't do it, because they know who the people really do support. I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, it is possible that networks such as Facebook and Google Plus are really just kind of biased towards what the status quo wants people to believe and wants people to support.
But would you think that would be secure if they had sort of a map of all the countries and everybody running, and if you were from that country, they could, you could submit your IP address, your location or something if you wanted to. You wouldn't have to, and then they would have these metrics on what people from every country really thought.
It'd be interesting, but it would certainly take a lot of overwork to get that system to scale to support millions and millions, billions of people, really.
But isn't it already there? I mean, aren't they already doing it? Because, like, if you go to Facebook, you can go to the bottom and it'll show you some of the most popular pages on Facebook, various, brands like McDonald's and Coca-Cola who they want you to like without logging in. So it's like, it seems like it would just be a matter of aggregating a basic system of listings of countries and people who are running for office.
Yeah, you say that, but unfortunately, any system, you can take any statistics and any words you want and twist them around to say whatever you want them to say. And I don't think the people running these kind of networks right now are capable of doing it, honestly.
Right. No, I mean, I'm not saying that they'd necessarily be the right people for the job, but in other senses,
it's an interesting idea, nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, it would be probably corrupt, but I think it would be better than just these vague polls that you hear about on TV that are obviously completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I don't know if we have to I think we end in 5 minutes, so I think we'll just go to the end. So let's see. So how many people are developing in Diaspora right now?
I'd say anywhere between 10 to 20 active developers are working on it at any given time. Mm-hmm. We just got back from Christmas break, so we're picking up steam again. But, we have people of all sorts of expertise on their levels all diving in and helping. And really, we're willing to accept any help we can get with that.
Right. So in terms of API, which people listening might not be too familiar with, but if you go to some random site, actually, if you go to exposingthetruth.info, I think that there's all sorts of little Facebook API, which is shows you can log in with Facebook, you can make Facebook comments, you can see different stuff about the Exposing Truth Facebook page. So that's obviously like a proprietary, closed kind of virus version of Facebook where they're trying to take over the internet. But I guess it is useful to some organizations. Do you think that the decentralized distributed network community could, like, say, Minds and Diaspora and Tent and all these other ones wanted to link together, is it really just a matter of developers building some specific APIs so you can connect to each network with the other network?
Well, it's
credentials?
Not quite that simple right now. I mean, there's 4 or 5 different kinds of decentralized social networks out there at least, and many more in development. And everyone kind of has a different idea of what that implementation should be. The closest thing we have right now, I would say, is probably OStatus, but in many ways, OStatus is just kind of a patchwork of different libraries that have been found over the web. But I think to answer your question, the way I kind of see where this is going in the future is, maybe someday your personal website is your social node. Maybe that's all you need. Maybe you have Minds.com and you can connect to Diaspora or Tent or Friendica or whoever and be able to speak a common language. You would be able to control what people saw you post and be able to control what your site looks like and the content on it. And I think that's going to take some very interesting directions over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, got the fingers crossed, that there are going to be some places with serious funding who will start supporting this idea more, because it's obviously a direction that a lot of people support. I would say there are definitely millions of people who would, if it was easy, in a blink of an eye, switch, as long as they could keep communicating with their current networks.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a necessity for communication to really move forward on the web.
Right, and with what you were saying about how everything we do is voting, what we spend money on, the networks that we're a part of, in the same way that people like to eat organic food, they might like to go to a conscious network instead, because you have all these various levels of your operating system. You eat organic food rather than GMO food. Maybe you drive an electric car as opposed to an oil guzzler. But then the other level is that you use a distributed conscious network as opposed to a proprietary closed network.
Right.
All right. So I think we're about to end. Thanks for coming on, Sean Tilley from Diaspora.
Thanks, Bill. It's been a pleasure.
Anything else you want to close off with?
No, this has been a really, really great conversation, and I hope to tune into your show more frequently now.
Yeah, just keep doing it.
All right, that's great.
All right, bye.
Bye.